Title: My father left everything to my brother, and left me only a letter, Part 1. Posted by you/throwaway letter drama. I didn't expect to be writing one of these posts. You know the ones, where you see someone spill their entire family drama on Reddit and think, wow, glad that's not me. Well, it's me now. The short version? My dad died 3 weeks ago. My older brother inherited everything. I got a letter. The long version: buckle up. The setup. I'm 31F. My brother, Lucas, is 34M. We grew up in a small coastal town where everyone knows everyone's business, whether you want them to or not. My mom passed when I was 12, so it was just dad raising us after that. He worked his ass off as a carpenter, the kind who could build a rocking chair out of scrap wood and make it look like it belonged in a magazine. We weren't rich, but dad's shop did well enough that we had food, clothes, and the occasional vacation. Lucas was always the golden boy, smart, athletic, effortlessly charming. He got a football scholarship, went to a fancy college, came back with a business degree. I was the artsy one. Average grades, quiet, the kid who doodled in the margins and read in the back of the class. Our dynamic was complicated. Lucas and I got along okay as kids, but by high school, it was like we lived in different worlds. He was the star quarterback, I was the girl in the art room during lunch. Dad doted on him more, or maybe it just looked that way because Lucas was always doing something worth bragging about. I never thought Dad didn't love me, but there was always this unspoken hierarchy: Lucas first, me second. The call. 3 weeks ago, I got the call. Dad had a heart attack in his workshop. Lucas was the one who found him. I drove down from the city that night, a 3-hour blur of bad coffee and worse thoughts. By the time I got there, everything was already in motion: the funeral home arrangements, the condolences, the casseroles from neighbors. Lucas was running the show like a CEO of grief. We buried Dad in the little churchyard by the ocean. The service was simple, which I liked: no pomp, no fluff, just a handful of people who loved him. I cried so hard my head hurt. Lucas cried too, but in that stoic, jaw-clenched way that still somehow got him praised for being so strong. The reading of the will. A week after the funeral, we met with Dad's lawyer. I honestly wasn't expecting much. Dad didn't have a mansion or a yacht. But he did have the workshop, some savings, and the house we grew up in, the one with the creaky stairs and the lemon tree in the backyard. The lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd been doing this since the dawn of time, cleared his throat and started reading. To Lucas, the house, the workshop, the tools, the savings, the truck, and the life insurance payout. To me, a sealed envelope. I'm not kidding. That was it. I sat there in the lawyer's office, staring at him like maybe he'd skipped a line. That's it? He adjusted his glasses. That's what your father left for you, yes. Lucas looked at me with this weird expression, not smug, but not exactly sympathetic either. Like he'd known this was coming and wasn't sure how I'd react. I took the envelope. It was thick, my name written on the front in Dad's blocky handwriting. The letter. I didn't open it right away. I don't know why. Maybe part of me thought if I waited, I could avoid whatever was inside. But curiosity's a hell of a drug, and that night in my crappy Airbnb room, I sat on the bed, tore it open, and started reading. It wasn't just a letter. It was 10 pages. The first line punched me in the gut. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably wondering why I didn't leave you the house or the money. You think? He went on to say that Lucas had shouldered more responsibility over the years, handling the shop's finances, helping with bills when times were tight. That the house should stay with someone who will keep it in the family. That he knew I valued independence and wouldn't want to be tied down by property or obligations. Then it got stranger. What I have for you is something only you can use. Something I couldn't give to Lucas. He wrote about an unfinished project in the workshop, a locked cabinet under his workbench. Inside, he said, Was something he'd been working on for years, for you. He didn't say what it was. Just that I'd need the enclosed key, and that I should be careful who you trust with it. The key was taped to the last page. Small, brass, cold in my palm. The visit. The next morning, I drove to the house. Lucas was in the workshop, sanding something like nothing had happened. "Dad left me a letter," I said. He nodded, not looking up. "Yeah, I figured. I need to get into the cabinet under his bench." That made him stop. He set down the sander, crossed his arms. "That cabinet's locked. I have the key." He gave me this long, unreadable look. "What's in it?" "I don't know. That's the point." We stood there in this weird silent standoff, the smell of sawdust between us. Finally, he stepped aside. "Fine. Go ahead." The cabinet. It took some wiggling, but the key turned. The cabinet door creaked open, and inside was a wooden box. About the size of a shoebox, carved with intricate patterns. I recognized Dad's style immediately. He always did this swirling, wave-like motif. I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. Lucas leaned over. "Can I see?" "No." I don't even know why I said it, but the second the word left my mouth, something in his expression changed, a flicker of irritation, maybe even fear. I put the box in my bag and left. The box. Back at the Airbnb, I sat with the box on the bed. It had no visible hinges, no latch. Just the carvings. I turned it over in my hands, tracing the swirls, until my finger caught on a tiny groove. I pressed it, and the lid popped open with a soft click. Inside was... well, let's just say it wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't anything I expected. And it made me realize Dad had been keeping secrets, big ones. Secrets that might explain why he left everything else to Lucas. To be continued. Title: My father left everything to my brother, and left me only a letter, Part 2. Posted by you/throwaway letter drama. So, where were we? Oh right. The box. You know how in movies, when someone opens a mysterious box, there's always a glowing light or a gasp. Yeah, real life isn't like that. In real life, you open the thing, your brain takes a second to process what you're seeing, and then you say something profound like, "What the hell?" Inside the box. It was filled with photographs. Not just any photographs, these were old. Some black and white, some faded Polaroids, some that looked like they'd been developed in one of those tiny drugstore booths back in the day. At first glance, they seemed random: a coastline, a couple of people I didn't recognize, a rusty fishing boat, a young man standing next to an unfamiliar car. But the weird part? None of them had Dad in them. Not a single one. I dug deeper and found envelopes, the yellow, brittle kind that crumbles if you bend it too much. They were addressed to names I didn't know. Postmarks from towns I'd never heard of. All dated between 1978 and 1983. And then, at the very bottom, there was a small leather notebook. The cover was cracked, soft with age. On the first page, in Dad's handwriting, were 3 words. "Don't trust Lucas." The notebook. My hands actually shook when I saw that. My heart was doing drum solos in my chest. The rest of the pages were, well, they weren't exactly a diary. They were more like a log. Dates, locations, and short notes. Port Brighton, December 6, '81, boat still missing. Met with Jay, says they're watching the harbor. Don't let him find the letters. Some entries had little sketches of the coastline. Others had initials and arrows pointing to what I assumed were landmarks. There were also lists of names, some crossed out. It read like a spy novel, except this was my dad. My dad, the carpenter who taught me how to sand wood and make birdhouses. The problem? I didn't know what to make of it. Was this some kind of elaborate joke? A project he never finished? Or was this real? One thing was certain, the moment I saw "Don't trust Lucas," something in my gut shifted. I'd always felt like Lucas got more from Dad, more praise, more trust, more everything. But Dad had never outright told me not to trust him. So now, I had this box of mystery, a notebook full of cryptic notes, and a brother who inherited literally everything else. Lucas gets curious. That night, I went to the kitchen in the Airbnb to make tea, and when I came back, the box was on the other side of the bed. I hadn't moved it. Lucas had a key to the Airbnb because he insisted on checking in while I was there, his words, not mine. I don't know if he'd been in the room while I was out, or if I was losing my mind, but I suddenly felt like every wall had eyes. The next morning, he showed up at the Airbnb unannounced. "Hey," he said, leaning in the doorway like it was his house. "You find anything interesting in Dad's stuff?" I played dumb. "Just some old photos. Nothing major." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know, if you don't want to deal with it, I can take care of whatever he left you. Free you from the hassle." It took every ounce of self-control not to laugh in his face. Digging deeper. That afternoon, I took the notebook to the public library, partly to get out of the Airbnb, partly to use the microfilm machines for the postmarks on the envelopes. The towns listed were all along the same stretch of coast about 60 miles from ours. The postmarks matched the dates in the notebook. And the names? Some popped up in old newspaper articles. One in particular made my blood run cold. Henry Mallory, missing since December 1981. Last seen near Port Brighton. The photo in the article showed a man who looked exactly like one of the people in the box's Polaroids. The letter I almost missed. When I got back to my room that night, I decided to go through the box again, slower this time. That's when I found it, a folded letter wedged between two photos. It was addressed to Anna. I don't know who Anna is. The handwriting wasn't Dad's. It said, "They're getting close. If anything happens to me, tell her the truth. She has a right to know about the harbor." The harbor. The same harbor Dad had sketched in his notebook. I didn't sleep that night. Lucas turns up the pressure. The next day, Lucas called me. Not texted. Called. "You should come to the house," he said. "We need to talk." I told him I was busy. His voice got tight. "I know you took something from the workshop. Dad wanted everything there to stay with me. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I wanted to ask him straight up what he knew. But my gut told me to keep playing dumb. The break-in. That night, someone tried to get into my Airbnb. I'm not exaggerating, I heard the door handle jiggle, saw the shadow under the crack of the door. When I shouted, the shadow moved away. Nothing was stolen, but the box was sitting on the floor in the middle of the room the next morning. I had left it in the closet. I started keeping it with me everywhere, even to the bathroom. The clue I couldn't ignore. The next entry in Dad's notebook, dated just a few weeks before he died, read, "Finally have proof. Lucas can't know. Meeting Anna on Tuesday. The thing is, Dad died on a Monday. The plan." At this point, I knew three things. Dad was hiding something big, something that involved missing people and a harbor. He didn't trust Lucas. Someone, maybe Lucas, maybe not, wanted that box badly enough to break into my room for it. So I decided to find Anna. The last twist, for now. I went back to the library, combed through old directories, and found 3 women named Anna who had lived in those coastal towns in the early 80s. 2 were dead. 1 had moved inland. I called the number listed in a 1999 directory. A woman answered. When I introduced myself and said my father's name, there was a long silence. Then she said, "I was wondering when you'd call. We don't have much time." To be continued. Title: My father left everything to my brother, and left me only a letter, Part 3, The Truth. Posted by you/throwaway letter drama. If you haven't read my previous posts, here's the short version. Dad died. Left everything to my brother, Lucas. Left me a single letter and a box of random old photos, envelopes, and a leather notebook with cryptic notes. The last page read, "Finally have proof. Lucas can't know. Meeting Anna on Tuesday. Dad died on a Monday. I tracked down Anna. She told me we don't have much time. This is what happened next. Meeting Anna. We agreed to meet at a diner about 40 minutes from my place. It was one of those small-town places that smells like fried eggs and coffee 24/7, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's business. Anna was in her late 60s, sharp blue eyes, silver hair pulled back in a braid. She looked like she'd seen storms, the kind that aren't just weather. "You look like him," she said before I even sat down. I didn't bother asking if she meant Dad. The story she told me. Anna and Dad had met in 1981. He was working construction near the coast. She was engaged to a fisherman named Henry Mallory. Yes, that Henry from the missing persons article. According to Anna, Henry had stumbled onto something at the harbor, something illegal. He'd been fixing up an old storage shed when he found crates inside that didn't belong there. Crates full of weapons. Henry told Anna and, for some reason, my father. Dad had been friends with some of the dock workers and apparently had a bit of a "don't trust the cops" streak. He started keeping notes, the same ones I now had in the notebook. A week later, Henry vanished. "Don't trust Lucas." I asked why Dad would write that. Anna's face hardened. "Lucas's godfather was a man named Carl Jensen," she said. "Carl ran a lot of business through that harbor back then. Your father told me Carl was mixed up in whatever Henry found. If Lucas ever knew, well, family ties can get complicated when money's involved." I didn't want to believe it. Lucas had his flaws, but, involved in this? Anna didn't flinch. "Carl disappeared in '84, but people like that don't leave clean slates behind. Your father thought someone was still moving things through there even recently. The last meeting that never happened. The Tuesday Dad had written about in his notebook, the meeting with Anna, was meant for him to hand over proof. She didn't know what the proof was, but she assumed it was something from the box. She told me she'd gotten a call from Dad that Sunday night. He said, if something happens to me, she gets the box. Not Lucas. You understand?" She understood. Then Monday morning, he was gone. Accident, they said. The call from Lucas. That night, after meeting Anna, I got a call from Lucas. "You've been talking to people you shouldn't," he said. Not angry, just cold. I didn't answer. "You're not the only one who misses him," he continued. "Don't make this uglier than it already is. Bring me the box, and this all goes away." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. Going back to the harbor. I don't know what possessed me, but the next morning I drove out to the harbor Dad had sketched. It hadn't changed much since the '80s, same rotting wooden posts, same smell of diesel and salt. One of the buildings matched a drawing from Dad's notebook almost perfectly. I went inside. The place was empty, mostly. In the back, under a tarp, were several sealed crates. I don't know why I opened one. Curiosity? Stupidity? Inside, rifles. Dozens of them. I took photos and got out fast. The break-in, round 2. When I got back to the Airbnb, the lock on the door was broken. The box was gone. Everything else was untouched. The letter I still had. The only thing they didn't get was Dad's letter, the one he'd left me in his will, because I'd kept it hidden in my car. I reread it that night, looking for something I might have missed. Most of it was vague. There are things I couldn't tell you, things I did to protect you. But near the end, there was a line I'd never paid attention to before. If you ever need help, give this to Frank. There was an address. Meeting Frank. Frank turned out to be a retired cop who lived 2 towns over. Big guy, shaved head, moved like his knees hurt but his brain was still sharp. When I showed him the letter, he sighed like he'd been waiting for this day. "I told your dad to burn those notes," he said. He never listened. He knew about the harbor. He knew about Carl Jensen. He even knew about Henry Mallory. "We could never make it stick," he said. "Too many people in the right places looking the other way." When I told him about the crates I'd seen, he leaned forward. "You still have those photos?" I nodded. "The choice." Frank told me flat out, if I gave him the photos, he'd take them to the right people, not local cops, but federal. "You'll have to testify," he said. "And if Lucas is tied up in this, it's going to get ugly." I thought about Dad. About Anna. About Henry. And about the fact that Lucas had broken into my place twice. I gave him the photos. The fallout. The next week was chaos. Federal agents raided the harbor. News crews swarmed the area. They found weapons, drugs, even some stolen art that had been missing for decades. Lucas was questioned, heavily. He wasn't arrested, but he looked like hell when I saw him at the grocery store a few days later. He didn't say a word to me. Just stared. The final conversation with Anna. I called Anna to tell her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Henry would have been proud of you. So would your dad." It hit me harder than I expected. The will, revisited. Legally, Lucas still had the house, the land, everything. I got nothing but that letter. But now I think I understand why. Dad knew the box would be safer in my hands than locked in some storage room Lucas could access. He knew I'd dig, even if it hurt. And maybe he didn't want me tangled up in the inheritance mess. He wanted me to have the truth instead. The last thing I'll say. Lucas moved away 3 months later. No forwarding address. The harbor's under constant watch now. Sometimes I think about that first night, opening the box and seeing those weird old photos. If I just tossed it all in the trash, my life would be quieter. But then I think about Dad's handwriting, "Don't trust Lucas." And I know I did the right thing. The end.